burn in hell! Get out of my sight!
What have I done to deserve this kind of treatment?
She set her blind father-in-law on fire in the kitchen. The revenge will shock you. She lit the stove, and in one terrifying second, she set her blind father-in-law on fire. Not just any man, her husband's father. The same man who blessed their marriage, the same man who once called her daughter. She thought she was alone in the kitchen. She thought no one could see the hatred twisting her face, or the violence burning behind her calm smile. What she didn't know was that someone was standing right there in the doorway, watching. Welcome to Ocean of Tales. Kindly like, comment, and subscribe on this channel. We will be notifying you when we drop a new video. Don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. Her husband had always believed he married a gentle, respectful wife. A woman who cared for his aging father with devotion. A woman incapable of cruelty. But what he witnessed that afternoon shattered his soul. A line crossed. A truth exposed. A mask ripped off in one horrifying flash of fire. Now he isn't just a husband. He isn't just a son. He is a man trapped between blood and betrayal, loyalty and justice, mercy and revenge. And the decision he makes next will unleash a storm so shocking, so catastrophic, that no one in that household will ever be the same again. Flames leap into the air the moment the stove clicks alive, spreading across the pan like they've been waiting for her signal. Heat rushes upward, licking the edges of the counter as she tilts the pot just enough to spill oil onto the open flame. The sudden whoosh fills the kitchen with a violent burst of orange light. Behind her, the blind old man hears the sound but can't see the danger swelling around him. He reaches forward with trust, unaware that trust is the exact thing being burned alive. And just as the fire rises, footsteps pause at the doorway. Smoke curls upward and thick, twisting lines as she steps away from the stove, her movements too smooth to be accidental. The old man leans forward, confused by the sudden wave of heat touching his fragile skin. He lifts his hand instinctively, searching for the familiar counter he used to navigate the world with, unaware that the world shifted into danger the moment she smiled. Behind them, a shadow hardens in the doorway. Someone watching, unmoving, catching every second with the sharp clarity of betrayal. And the kitchen grows hotter, like it's preparing to expose her. The fire spreads faster than she anticipated, racing along the slick film of oil on the floor, tracing her intentions like a signature she can never erase. The old man tries to stand, but the sudden blaze steals the air from his lungs, forcing him into a coughing fit that shakes his frail body. She turns slightly, pretending to panic, but her eyes stay fixed on the flame's progress. What she doesn't see is the figure gripping the doorframe behind her, breath held tight, stunned by the monster emerging from the woman he thought he knew. Heat slams into the room as if trying to push its way into his body, wrapping the old man in a suffocating blanket he cannot escape. He reaches out again, trembling fingers catching nothing but rising smoke. The fire's glow reflects off the glossy cabinets, painting the kitchen in frantic streaks of orange. She stands close enough to appear concerned but far enough to keep innocence as her shield. Behind her, the silent observer feels something tear inside his chest, a breaking so deep it shifts the axis of the home forever. A loud crack shoots across the room as the pot handle snaps, sending a stream of burning oil toward the old man. Panic erupts in his voice, a raw sound that slices through the air like something dying. She steps backward sharply, letting the flames surge toward him unchecked. In the doorway, the witness feels the urge to run forward, to intervene, but he remains frozen by the truth unfolding before him. His heartbeat pounds in his ears, louder than the fire, louder than her fake gasp, louder than anything he felt before this moment. The old man collapses to the ground, arms flailing blindly as heat scorches his skin, and the fire clings to him like punishment. She rushes forward just enough to maintain her performance, lifting a towel halfway before dropping it again, as if overwhelmed. To the untrained eye, it would look like fear. But the man watching knows better. He sees the hesitation. He sees the calculation. He sees the dark satisfaction she tries to bury beneath trembling hands. And in that second, he realizes his marriage has been sitting on a lie so big it finally caught fire. The fire alarm shrieks through the house, sending sharp echoes down every corridor as smoke swallows the kitchen. Neighbors shout outside, dogs bark, and the world seems to tighten around this one moment of betrayal. She finally moves to pull the old man away, but the witness knows it's too late. The damage is done. The truth is out. And as he steps backward slowly, retreating into the hallway before she notices him, a storm begins to form inside him, a cold, calculated storm that will rewrite everything she believes she controls. A soft morning breeze once drifted through that same kitchen, long before the flames, carrying the smell of fried plantain and fresh tomatoes as she moved like a gentle rhythm between stove and sink. Her wrapper swayed quietly, her feet gliding across the tiles with easy grace. Visitors who walked in saw a scene that looked like peace, like the picture of a good wife holding the house together. They smiled, praised her, and carried that story back to the community. None of them knew that every warm gesture was hiding something cold underneath. She learned early how to wear politeness like perfume, applying it carefully before stepping into any room where judgment was waiting. In front of her husband's family, she lowered her gaze, adjusted her tone, measured every step to look respectful. She became an expert in reading their faces, noticing who liked her, who tolerated her, who pretended. Whenever they laughed at her jokes, she felt a small victory. Whenever they doubted her, she felt her chest burn. The more they underestimated her, the more she sharpened the mask she eventually weaponized. Her transformation didn't start in that marriage. It started in childhood, in a house where love felt conditional and attention came like rain in dry season, rare, unpredictable, and often too late. She grew up listening to adults compare her to others, always falling just a little bit short. Pretty, but not the prettiest. Smart, but not the smartest. Good, but never the favorite. Those seeds of almost enough sank deep into her heart, growing into a constant need to prove something. And whenever she felt small, the mask of perfection became her only shield. By the time she met her husband, she had perfected the art of becoming whatever people wanted to see. Around him, she was soft and supportive, listening to his dreams like they were sacred. Around his friends, she was witty, disciplined, ambitious. Around his mother, she was humble and eager to serve. Each version of her felt convincing, almost real, even to herself. But behind closed doors, when the lights were off and the makeup washed away, a different version stared back in the mirror, tired, resentful, terrified of being seen as ordinary. She noticed quickly that his father did not melt for performances the way others did. The blind old man could not see her forced smile or polished outfits. He only heard the weight in her footsteps, the sighs she thought were silent, the edge in her voice when she was tired of pretending. His questions were direct, his advice often blunt, his presence unshaken by charm. It unsettled her, because for the first time, her mask did not guarantee control. Every time he corrected her or questioned her motives, her insecurity twisted into a darker, sharper feeling she named disrespect. Small slights slowly turned into stories in her mind. A harmless comment became an insult replayed in her memory. An honest question felt like an attack on her worth. She started collecting these moments the way some people collect receipts, stacking them silently inside her heart. Whenever she felt ignored by her husband or overlooked by the family, she mentally replayed old scenes, rewriting them in a way that made his father the enemy. Slowly, the narrative shifted from "we misunderstand each other" to "he is against me," and from there, the fall became easier. On the outside, nothing changed. She still helped him to his seat, still served his meals, still guided his hand toward the cup on the table so he wouldn't spill. Visitors saw tenderness and believed it. Her husband saw sacrifice and trusted it. Even the old man sometimes allowed himself to believe her kindness was real. But inside, every act of service began to feel like a debt she was owed, a silent invoice waiting to be paid with respect, authority, and power. When those payments didn't come, the mask stayed, but something bitter started growing underneath it. The old man wakes each morning by tracing the air with his fingers, feeling for the familiar world he no longer sees. Every sound becomes a map: the shuffle of slippers, the clink of plates, the hush of curtains opening. But over the months, the rhythm of her footsteps changed. What once sounded light and warm grew heavier, sharper, carrying a tension he couldn't name. He would sit quietly, pretending not to notice, but fear always tightened in his chest. Something in that house was shifting, and his blindness made him the last to understand it. He began memorizing sounds the way others memorize faces, her breathing when she walked past him, the way she slammed cabinets when she thought no one listened, the sudden stillness whenever he reached for something she didn't want him to touch. Even without sight, he could feel anger in the air, thick as harmattan dust. Some nights he stayed awake on purpose, listening to her pacing the hallway with steps too restless to belong to peace. But without evidence, he stayed silent, carrying secret fear like a bruise beneath his ribs, waiting for a day he prayed would never come. His son, meanwhile, lived in the comfort of sight, seeing smiles where lies lived, seeing kindness where resentment grew. He believed in the world his wife showed him. He believed in the gentle touch she offered his father. And he believed her stories of exhaustion and stress whenever tension rose. He built an entire marriage on trust, never imagining that trust could be used against him. He was a man convinced that love could not wear a mask. Yet each time he entered a room lately, he found conversations ending too quickly, footsteps freezing, and silence swallowing truth. The old man tried to warn him indirectly, asking questions that hovered between concern and fear. But his son brushed them aside with the confidence of someone who thinks good hearts can sense danger before it arrives. He forgot that blindness sometimes sharpens instincts faster than vision. He forgot that silence can be a warning louder than words. So he kept believing, kept defending, kept reassuring. And each reassurance pushed the old man deeper into unease, feeling like a prisoner trapped in a home where no one else could hear the approaching storm. One afternoon, the old man reached for his walking stick and felt the faint smell of burnt fabric on its handle. It wasn't enough to raise alarm, but enough to make dread crawl under his skin. He stood still, listening carefully to the house breathe around him. Somewhere in that quiet, he sensed the danger circling closer, like an animal testing the edges of its prey. He tried to steady his heartbeat, knowing fear made him clumsy. But something inside him whispered a truth he didn't want to believe. He was no longer safe in his own son's home. His son, too, felt something brewing, though he couldn't name it. The warmth in his marriage had cooled into a strange politeness. His wife's smile felt rehearsed, her touch calculated, her affection suddenly measurable. He noticed her watching him more than she used to, as if waiting to see what he suspected, or didn't. He noticed she avoided being alone with his father for too long, but insisted loudly that she was always caring. These contradictions sat in his stomach like stones. But confusion often hides what the heart isn't ready to face. The day the fire erupted, the son entered the kitchen expecting the usual scent of spices and home. Instead, he met a vision that broke something permanent inside him. Flames danced hungrily toward his blind father, and the woman he trusted stood frozen, not in shock, but in calculation. That instant rewired every memory he ever held of her. Love fell apart in his chest like shattered glass. Betrayal rushed in like cold water. And as he watched the truth unfold in front of him, he understood the full weight of his father's earlier fear, because now he felt it too. Steam once rose gently from this same kitchen, curling around pots of jollof and stew as laughter drifted from the living room. Those days made the house feel alive, warm, predictable. But slowly, the kitchen transformed into a silent battleground, carrying tension like smoke trapped beneath a closed lid. Every clang of a spoon, every shuffle of feet, every opened cabinet felt like a coded message only the two of them understood. And though no one said a word, the air thickened with a conflict neither wanted to acknowledge, but both kept feeding quietly. The shift began with small moments people usually forget: an ignored greeting, a sigh too loud, a plate set down harder than necessary. She noticed how his father corrected her tone, how he repeated instructions she already understood, how he reached for things before she offered them. Each action felt like a reminder that she wasn't good enough. Each moment sharpened her resentment. She carried those slights into her sleep, stacking them into memories far heavier than they were in reality, letting them ferment into something darker. And every morning, she woke more convinced he was her enemy. Cold mornings turned the kitchen tiles into mirrors reflecting her insecurities. She stood stirring pots not with love but with simmering bitterness, replaying the old man's words in her mind, words he never meant to be sharp, but felt sharp to a heart already bruised. Sometimes she would pause mid-stir, gripping the spoon tightly, imagining what life would feel like without him in the house. The thought frightened her at first. Then it comforted her. And slowly, it became a fantasy she visited more often than she admitted. The old man felt the tension without seeing it. He sensed it in the way plates were handed to him, softly but without warmth. He sensed it in her footsteps that avoided his side of the kitchen. He sensed it in the silence that felt too controlled, too quiet, like someone rehearsing emotions instead of living them. He stayed patient, hoping she just needed time to adjust. But every day around her felt colder, like the kitchen lights had dimmed even though the bulbs stayed bright. And something inside him whispered a warning he desperately tried to ignore. One evening, their simmering conflict boiled over. She reached for a pot, and he instinctively reached the same direction, unaware she was there. Their hands brushed, and she pulled away too fast. The spoon slipped, clattering loudly. The old man apologized softly, but she stood frozen, eyes burning, feeling humiliated by a moment that meant nothing. That tiny accident replayed in her mind for weeks, morphing into a symbol of disrespect, fueling a story where she was always the injured one. And once hurt becomes a narrative, truth becomes irrelevant. The resentment deepened each time her husband praised his father's wisdom or joked about his stubbornness. She began to feel outnumbered in her own home. She cleaned angrily, cooked angrily, smiled angrily, until anger became the only language she understood. The kitchen, once a place of warmth, now felt like a cage holding all the emotions she refused to express. She started slamming drawers harder, leaving dishes stacked noisily, letting pots boil longer than necessary. Each action carried a message, even if no one else recognized it. But the old man did, and that frightened him more each day. By the morning of the fire, the kitchen had become a minefield of quiet hostility. She walked in with a stiffness that came from months of swallowed resentment. The old man followed with cautious steps, hoping for peace, but expecting none. The air hummed with unspoken history. When she reached for the stove that day, it wasn't sudden rage. It was the final chapter of a war she had been fighting alone in her mind. And as the flames roared to life, the kitchen finally revealed the truth both of them had been avoiding. Resentment had become deadly. He steps back from the kitchen doorway long before the flames are fully out, moving like a man whose soul has just been punched out of his body. His breathing turns shallow, his palms sweat, and his mind spins as if the house itself has tilted. Every piece of furniture feels unfamiliar, every hallway suddenly longer, every memory rewritten. He walks into the living room, sits heavily, and stares at nothing. Silence wraps around him, not as comfort, but as a witness demanding he face the truth he can't unsee. And that silence refuses to loosen its grip. She rushes in moments later, coughing theatrically, guiding his father out with urgency that feels too polished. He watches her wipe imaginary tears, hears her mutter panicked prayers, sees her tremble just enough to look believable. But his eyes have changed, and with new eyes, her performance looks like a badly rehearsed drama. He doesn't speak. He doesn't help. He simply watches her, studying every movement, every pause, every breath. She fumbles slightly under his gaze, sensing something different, but unsure what he has discovered. His silence slices deeper than any shouted accusation. He begins noticing things he ignored for years. How she overreacts to small inconveniences, how she grips her jaw when his father speaks, how her kindness appears only when others are watching. Every gesture becomes evidence. Every smile becomes a mask. He replays old arguments in his mind, seeing new meaning in comments he once dismissed. He recalls moments he thought were coincidences: burnt food, misplaced items, sudden coldness around his father. The patterns begin forming a disturbing picture he can no longer deny. And each discovery tightens something inside him, like a rope pulling at his chest. He starts moving quietly around the house, entering rooms without warning, standing in doorways longer, lingering in hallways she thought were empty. He observes her reactions. The quick drop of her shoulders, the forced warmth in her voice, the way she checks if he's watching before touching his father. She becomes jumpy, overly helpful, overly sweet. He senses her panic like heat rising from the floor. She senses his suspicion like a shadow growing behind her. Their movements turn into a silent dance neither of them controls, each step loaded with unspoken questions. He installs a small camera near the hallway. Just one at first, positioned behind a basket of folded clothes. Not to trap her, not yet, but to confirm the truth already burning in his chest. He checks the footage late at night, heart thumping as he scrubs through hours of nothingness, waiting for a glimpse of the person she becomes when she thinks no one is looking. One night, he finds it, a moment where she pushes his father's hand away too sharply, then smiles sweetly when she hears footsteps. The clip is short, but devastating. And he saves it. Her anxiety grows as the days pass. She feels him pulling away, senses his eyes tracking her like she's being measured, analyzed, decoded. She starts cooking more, cleaning more, offering unnecessary apologies, trying to pull him back into the illusion she once controlled. But the more she tries, the more he sees the cracks, the layers she once hid so flawlessly. He watches her now the way a detective watches a suspect, calm, patient, gathering truth quietly. And with each new observation, betrayal grows heavier in his chest, forming a storm too quiet to predict. One evening, he stands behind the door frame, unseen, and listens as she sighs heavily while guiding his father to the couch, her voice dripping frustration, her hands too rough, her kindness evaporated the moment she thought she was alone. That single moment completes the puzzle he has been assembling piece by piece. His silence solidifies into certainty. He steps back into his room, closes the door softly, and sits in the dark with a truth that now feels impossible to unhear. And in that breathless darkness, a quiet vow is born, one she will never see coming. He wakes the next morning before dawn, moving around the room with a stiffness she has never seen. His footsteps avoid her side of the bed, his hands brush past her folded clothes without touching them, his silence fills every corner like cold fog. She watches him dress, waiting for the usual smile or casual remark, but nothing comes. The absence feels louder than words. His quiet feels intentional, calculated, heavy with meaning she can't decode. And as he leaves the room without a backward glance, she feels the first real crack snap through her confidence. She follows him into the kitchen, pretending to fix breakfast, hoping routine will pull them back into normal. But he moves around her like she's made of glass, careful not to brush against her, careful not to share space. He serves his father gently, thoughtfully, like the man deserves protection from unseen wounds. She forces a smile, reaching for compliments she used to give easily, but he doesn't look up. His silence becomes a mirror reflecting her own guilt. And every second he refuses to engage tells her something is deeply, dangerously wrong. She begins adjusting her behavior. softening her voice, slowing her movements, repeating acts of kindness like a script she hopes will fix the story. She brings him tea unasked, rearranges the living room, places fresh towels in the bathroom. But none of it pulls him closer. He observes her without warmth, like he's watching a stranger practice emotions she doesn't feel. She senses him analyzing her, measuring her, waiting for something she doesn't understand. The more she performs, the colder he becomes. And that coldness sends panic crawling up her spine. He starts returning home later, lingering outside in the car even when the gate slides open smoothly. She watches through the window, counting every extra minute he spends in silence, every pause before he enters a home that once felt safe. When he finally steps inside, he doesn't greet her with a kiss or a smile, just a nod, distant and distracted. She tries to ask how his day went, but his answers are tight, clipped, empty. Each short sentence feels like a wall rising between them, and she can't tell if he's building it to keep her out or keep something in. The househelp quietly notices the shift too. She watches her madam walk like she's stepping on cracked eggshells, watches Olga move with the sharpness of someone storing anger in a locked drawer. Even the father-in-law senses it, turning his head whenever he hears tension in their silence. But no one says a word. The household becomes a place of performed politeness, forced smiles, and questions no one wants to ask. And inside this fragile quiet, she feels the weight of being watched, not lovingly, but suspiciously, by the man she thought she controlled. Her fear grows sharper when she overhears him on the phone late at night, speaking in low tones she can't fully catch. She stands behind the door, pulse racing, hoping to hear her name. Every muffled sentence becomes an accusation in her mind. She imagines him speaking to friends, to a sister, to a lawyer, to someone gathering pieces of a story she desperately wants to bury. When he hangs up without noticing her presence, she retreats to the hallway feeling breathless, wondering which version of herself he's describing and who now knows the truth. One evening, she reaches for his hand at the dinner table, hoping to reconnect, but he pulls away instinctively, like touching her burns. The rejection slices through her chest, leaving her stunned. She stares at him, hoping for an explanation, but he keeps eating slowly, gaze fixed on his plate as if her presence means nothing anymore. In that moment, she realizes control has shifted. The power she once wielded quietly is slipping through her fingers. And as she watches him walk away afterward, she feels a dread she has no words for, because she knows something irreversible is coming. The morning begins with the distant buzz of phones vibrating in pockets and handbags across the estate, each notification carrying the same video, the same flames, the same kitchen, the same blind old man stumbling for help. By sunrise, the clip spreads through WhatsApp groups like wildfire, forwarded with gasps, emojis, and half-formed prayers. Neighbors start stepping outside, gathering in small clusters, their faces tight with shock. Inside the house, she feels the ground shift before she even knows why. Something invisible has cracked open, and the air tastes like judgment. She steps outside to toss the trash, and the silence hits her first, too heavy, too focused, too unnatural. Women watering their flowers freeze mid-motion, their eyes widening at the sight of her. Two teenagers whisper behind a parked car, shoving a phone into each other's hands. A security guard stares too long, his face unreadable. She forces a smile, pretending not to notice the stares. But when one neighbor quickly turns her phone face down as she walks past, dread slices through her belly. Something devastating is already out there. Her husband is inside, watching the same video replay silently on the TV, sound muted, truth deafening. He sees her slip into the frame, sees the fake panic, sees every lie unfold in high resolution. He watches the flames, watches his father's confusion, watches her hesitation. He doesn't blink once. When she enters the living room, his eyes remain glued to the screen. She freezes as she recognizes the footage. Every lie she planned to tell dies on her tongue, replaced by a suffocating dread. And before she can speak, another notification lights up his phone. Relatives begin calling, one after another, some shouting, some crying, some demanding explanations she doesn't have. Her phone vibrates so aggressively it slips from her hand and hits the floor. Messages pour in from numbers she hasn't seen in years, dragging her name across family group chats she once entered proudly. From outside, voices rise as more neighbors gather near the gate, showing each other the circulating clip, pointing at the house like it's a crime scene. Her chest tightens as the walls around her suddenly feel too thin to hide behind. By midday, the community WhatsApp group erupts with voice notes, moral lessons, and dramatic speculations. Aunties in distant cities send long messages about how wickedness hides under beauty. Old schoolmates publicly distance themselves. Even strangers analyze her body language, like investigators dissecting evidence. Her name trends inside the estate and spills into nearby groups. She tries to defend herself with frantic typing, but every message she sends gets drowned by screenshots of the video. And with every comment, her reputation sinks deeper into a pit she cannot climb out of. In desperation, she steps outside again, hoping to explain, hoping someone will listen. But phones rise instantly, recording her walk of shame. Some whisper prayers. Others whisper condemnation. A few pity her, but more glare with a coldness only betrayal can provoke. She hears one woman mutter that prison might be too soft. Another says she always suspected something off about her smile. Their words feel like stones thrown at her pride. She tries to speak, but her voice cracks under the weight of a crowd that has already chosen its verdict. Her husband finally steps outside, standing in the doorway like a judge emerging for sentencing. The neighbors fall silent, waiting for him to speak. She turns toward him, eyes pleading, hands trembling. But he doesn't look at her. His gaze sweeps the crowd, then settles on the ground, heavy with disappointment. That silence speaks louder than anything he could say. She senses, in that terrifying stillness, that the community's judgment is only the beginning. Something far more personal, far more devastating, is coming from the man she once believed she could deceive. The living room fills slowly, starting with a single knock that echoes like a verdict. One by one, relatives arrive. Faces tight with worry, anger, and disbelief. Aunties clutch handbags like weapons. Uncles fold their arms as if bracing for confession. Cousins linger by the walls, their eyes hovering between pity and curiosity. The father-in-law sits quietly on the couch, bandaged and fragile. She stands in the center of them all, heartbeat racing, palms sweating. The walls closing in. No judge enters the room, but the atmosphere is already a courtroom, and she is unmistakably on trial. The oldest aunt begins the questioning. Her voice slices through the silence as she demands to know what happened in that kitchen. The wife stammers, her words collapsing under the weight of a truth too big to hide. She reaches for excuses, stress, accident, misunderstanding, but every sentence trembles. The family watches her unravel like a thread pulled from a woven cloth. Her husband sits apart, arms crossed, eyes burning with a mixture of hurt and certainty. And each failed explanation drags her further into guilt she can no longer escape. One uncle slams his palm on the table, his frustration sharp. He speaks about trust, family honor, and the unforgivable act captured on camera. She tries to argue, but every look in the room tells her they already know. Another cousin plays the video quietly on his phone, the flames reflected in everyone's eyes. She sees their disappointment, sees their anger, sees her own fall from grace captured in pixels and replayed like evidence. And with every replay, the room grows colder, turning her shame into something solid. The father-in-law raises his hand slightly, asking for a moment. His voice quivers, not from weakness, but from the weight of betrayal. He speaks softly about trust, about the way he depended on her hands to guide him, about the fear he felt each day, but never wanted to voice. As he talks, tears slip down his cheeks, unseen but unmistakable. The room shifts. Even those who wanted to defend her fall silent. And she stands frozen, realizing the man she hurt most is the only one still speaking without anger. Her husband finally stands, moving forward like a man carrying an entire house on his shoulders. He recounts what he saw, the flames, her hesitation, the moment the mask fell. His voice doesn't rise. It doesn't shake. It simply delivers truth with the precision of a blade. Each word strips away another layer of her innocence. He speaks of sleepless nights, of watching her shift, of recording evidence he wishes he never needed. With every detail revealed, she watches her marriage crumble brick by brick. Arguments erupt as relatives debate what punishment fits such a betrayal. Some demand police involvement immediately. Others insist on spiritual intervention. A few suggest exile to her family. Voices collide in the room, accusations, prayers, disappointment, all swirling around her like a storm she created but can no longer control. She stands mute, overwhelmed by the reality that the people she once manipulated now see her clearly. Her tears finally fall, but they feel too late, too small, too powerless. And in the noise, one question hangs heavy. What comes next? Her husband raises a hand, silencing the entire room. His decision settles over the living room with finality. He announces that this home, this marriage, this family can no longer hold her. She feels the words hit her chest like a blow she wasn't prepared for. Even the relatives who despised her gasp softly. He doesn't shout. He doesn't insult her. He simply ends everything with a calmness that hurts more than rage ever could. And as the family watches her crumble, they all sense the truth. The consequences have only just begun. He begins the next morning by opening the wardrobe they once shared, pulling out her clothes with slow, deliberate movements. The soft fabrics that once smelled like home now feel foreign in his hands. He folds each item without anger, laying them into a suitcase with the cold precision of someone cutting emotional ties one stitch at a time. She watches from the doorway, trembling, unable to speak. Every folded blouse feels like a verdict. And the calmness in his face tells her this isn't punishment driven by impulse, but justice built from certainty. He moves next to the drawer where documents live, marriage certificates, bank papers, emergency contacts, shared accounts. One by one, he removes her name from everything that binds them legally and financially. The pen glides across the paper without hesitation, each stroke a reminder of a trust she burned beyond repair. She stands behind him, swallowing panic as he crosses out signatures, updates beneficiaries, and stamps new forms. She tries to reach out, but he does not flinch, does not look back. The silence between them tightens like a rope pulling her toward consequences she can no longer outrun. He unlocks his phone and begins making calls, short, firm conversations with people who matter. The bank, the estate association, his employer, his sister. He speaks in calm tones, giving instructions with the clarity of someone who has rehearsed each step. Her name disappears from the emergency contact list. Her access card is revoked. Her allowance is canceled. Each update lands like a blow she never sees coming. She listens helplessly, realizing that her influence in his world, his networks, his resources, his trust, has been erased within minutes. And she knows he's not done yet. He walks into the father-in-law's room and kneels beside the old man, helping him sit upright with a tenderness that breaks her. He asks gentle questions, checks his bandages, offers water, adjusts pillows, all the acts she once performed through gritted teeth. She watches him cradle the man she harmed, his touch steady, his love unchanged. The contrast between her cruelty and his compassion slices through her like truth dipped in fire. And she realizes the revenge she feared might not be loud, but it will be devastatingly thorough. He retrieves a small bundle of printed screenshots from a drawer, the footage, the timestamps, the saved clips of her cruelty. She gasps as she recognizes each image. He doesn't need to shout. He lets the evidence speak for him. He was patient. He was observant. He was meticulous. Everything she thought she hid, he preserved. He places the bundle on the table, not as a threat, but as a statement. There is no lie she can tell, no story she can twist, no performance she can stage. The truth now has a body, and he controls it entirely. He calls her family next. His voice stays steady as he explains that she must return home. They respond with shock, disbelief, frantic questions she cannot answer. He offers no room for negotiation. He gives them a time, an address, and a simple directive: come for her. She feels herself shrinking with every sentence he speaks. The man she once manipulated with smiles and softness now moves like a judge issuing decrees. And she realizes something terrifying. His revenge isn't meant to destroy her body. It's meant to dismantle her world. When he finally turns to her, eyes cold but not cruel, he tells her to pack what's left. No anger, no threats, just finality. His quietness burns worse than shouted insults, because it means he has nothing left to fight for. She takes a shaky step toward him, hoping for a chance to fix something, anything, but he steps aside without meeting her gaze. In that small movement, she feels the full weight of her downfall. And as she carries the suitcase toward the door, she senses the next phase waiting outside, one she cannot prepare for. She steps onto the front porch with her suitcase dragging softly behind her, the wheels scraping against the tiled floor like a final announcement of her fall. The house feels colder from the outside, towering above her like a judge she once believed she could charm. Neighbors gather at their balconies, pretending to water plants, pretending not to stare, but every eye follows her. Their whispers float through the crisp morning air, turning her shame into a spectacle. And as she grips the handle tighter, the realization settles heavy. This walk is no longer hers to control. A car horn blares softly at the gate, signaling the arrival of her sister-in-law. The door swings open with authority as the older woman steps out, her expression carved from stone. Without greeting or pity, she marches toward her, takes the suitcase from her trembling hand, and walks back toward the gate. The meaning is clear. This is not a visit. This is an extraction. She feels stripped of status as the woman gestures for her to follow. And every step she takes behind her becomes another piece of pride crushed beneath her feet. The estate security guards stand straighter as she passes, their eyes lingering on her like they're memorizing the fall of someone they once respected. One adjusts the logbook unnecessarily. Another pretends to check the CCTV feed. Yet none of them intervene. Their silence is louder than judgment. It is consent. She wants to vanish into the ground, to disappear before another whisper floats through the compound. But the path ahead stretches long and exposed, forcing her to walk through the center of every watching gaze without a single place to hide. Phones rise discreetly from behind curtains and half-open car doors, their lenses capturing bits of her humiliation. Someone records a slow video of her passing by frame, as if documenting a criminal's final walk. Children stop playing and stare, confused yet curious about the woman who once smiled at them through the window. A mother gently pulls her daughter back, whispering, "Don't look." The words sting like acid. She feels the sting of tears, but she swallows them down because crying now would only feed the gossip she fears will never end. Her husband stands in the doorway of their home, arms folded, face unreadable, the silhouette of a man who has closed a chapter with irreversible ink. She searches his features for softness, a hint of hesitation, a flicker of the love that once held them together. But there is none. His stillness becomes the final blow, calm, distant, unmovable. She tries to speak, but her voice collapses into the breeze. He doesn't step forward. He doesn't wave. He doesn't blink. He simply watches her with the silence of someone who has already grieved and let go. Her sister-in-law leads her to the waiting car and opens the back door with mechanical precision. No words, no comfort, no softness. She slides into the seat, feeling the cold leather press against her legs like judgment. Her suitcase is tossed into the trunk, and the woman closes the door with a firm, final click that sounds exactly like exile. The car begins to roll away slowly, passing the home she once ruled with quiet manipulation and hidden resentment. And she can't help wondering how she became a stranger in the life she fought so hard to control. As the compound gate swings open, a sharp breeze rushes through, carrying the smell of dust, petrol, and something that feels like endings. She turns her head for one last look at the house, its bright walls, its trimmed hedges, its quiet balcony. But the door is already closing, shutting her out completely. No one waves. No one watches. No one cares. The gate locks behind her with a metallic thud, sealing her fate. And as the car drives into the open road, she feels the terrifying weight of the truth. Exile is only the beginning of her punishment. She drops the suitcase in the quiet spare room, the dull thud echoing off the bare walls like a reminder of everything she has lost. Dust rises softly from the carpet as she sinks onto the edge of the bed, feeling the weight of silence press down on her shoulders. The room smells of stale air and forgotten visitors, a place where people stay only when life pushes them out of their own stories. Her chest tightens as the truth settles in. This is not refuge. This is consequences made physical. She walks to the mirror fixed above the tiny dresser, her reflection flickering beneath the weak bulb overhead. The woman staring back looks nothing like the person she pretended to be, eyes swollen, posture bent, spirit cracked in half. Her hands tremble as she touches the glass, tracing the outline of her own exhaustion. Each line on her face feels like a confession she never meant to make. And as she studies herself closer, she realizes with chilling clarity that this downfall didn't happen overnight. It was built, brick, by her own hands. She kneels beside the suitcase and begins unpacking slowly, her fingers brushing over clothes that once felt like armor. Colorful fabrics she wore to impress, expensive outfits she used to command respect. Now they feel heavy and useless. She folds each piece neatly, but with every crease, memories of jealousy, resentment, and insecurity rise like smoke from a fire long ignored. She tries to push them down, but the room offers no distractions, no noise, no lies to hide behind. This time, her thoughts are louder than her pride. She sits on the cold tile, closing her eyes as the events replay. Her rage in the kitchen, the flame, the scream, her husband's frozen silhouette in the doorway. Her stomach twists violently as the truth hits her. She didn't just hurt a man. She betrayed a family that once trusted her. The image of her blind father-in-law struggling to breathe gnaws at her mind like guilt with sharp teeth. She presses her palms to her face, but the memory burns through her fingers, and she knows she can never unsee what she did. Her sister-in-law knocks lightly on the door later, leaving a pamphlet on the table, counseling sessions, support groups, emotional rehabilitation. She pretends not to hear the footsteps fade down the hallway. But when the silence settles again, she reaches for the pamphlet with shaking hands. The pages open to words she once mocked: healing, accountability, trauma cycles, emotional triggers. She reads them slowly, painfully, the way someone swallows bitter medicine. And as she turns each page, the truth becomes impossible to deny. The darkness didn't start with the fire, it started within her. She steps outside into the small balcony at dusk, the cool breeze brushing against her skin like a reluctant comfort. Cars pass on the street below, families laugh through open windows, and neighbors share evening conversations. Life continues without her drama, without her presence. She wraps her arms around herself, realizing just how small she has become. For the first time, she does not blame her husband, the father-in-law, or the extended family. She places the blame where it belongs, on the fear she allowed to grow into monsters. She returns to the bed and lies down, staring at the ceiling with watery eyes as the darkness thickens around her. Regret claws at her chest, but beneath it lies something unexpected. An ache for change, a longing to rebuild the parts of herself she abandoned long before marriage. She whispers a broken vow into the empty room, promising that if life ever offers her a second chance, she will not waste it behind masks or bitterness. But even as that hope flickers inside her, one haunting question lingers. Will anyone ever trust her enough to let her try? She walks toward the house she once ruled with confidence, her feet dragging across the pavement as if every step must first fight through the weight of her own fear. The compound looks different now, quieter, colder, stripped of the warmth she once claimed. When she reaches the veranda, the door opens slowly, revealing her husband and father-in-law seated side by side. Their expressions are steady, unreadable, holding no anger, yet no softness. She stands frozen at the entrance, unsure whether she is being welcomed inside or merely tolerated for this final reckoning. Her husband gestures to the single wooden chair placed directly opposite them, a position that feels more like an interrogation seat than a spot for conversation. She lowers herself into it, spine straight, hands clasped tightly to hide the trembling. The silence stretches long, thick enough to choke on. She waits for shouting, accusations, demands, but none come. Instead, they watch her with a quiet expectation of men who want truth, not excuses. And that quietness burns more than any insult ever could. She begins to speak, but the words shake loose from her lips like broken fragments. She confesses, not to manipulate, not to defend, but to expose the insecurities that rotted her from inside. She admits the jealousy that clouded her judgment, the fear that made her hostile, the lies she crafted to feel important. Her voice cracks mid-sentence, but she keeps going because she knows apologies mean nothing without truth. When her confession ends, she looks up with tear-blurred eyes, terrified of what their silence means. Her father-in-law listens with his head slightly tilted, his expression softened by age and suffering. When he finally speaks, his words land gently but deeply. He says he cannot forget what happened. He cannot pretend the pain never existed. But he also knows bitterness is a heavy burden, one he is too old to carry. He forgives her, not because she deserves it, but because forgiveness frees the soul holding it. The warmth in his voice stings her eyes because it is the very grace she never extended to him. Her husband remains silent a few moments longer, his chest rising slowly as he weighs emotions she can't read. When he finally stands, he doesn't reach for her hand. Instead, he places a neatly folded sheet of paper on the table. A structured plan filled with boundaries, conditions, and a timeline for rebuilding trust. He explains quietly that forgiveness is possible, but reconciliation is not guaranteed. She must earn her way back, step by step, truth by truth. The firmness in his tone reveals that love may remain, but blind acceptance will never return. She takes the paper with trembling fingers, feeling the full weight of the path ahead. It's not a punishment. It's a second chance wrapped in discipline. She nods slowly, not asking for more, not begging for shortcuts. Her eyes move from the paper to the two men she hurt, and for the first time, she feels a humility born not of shame but of growth. Yet even as hope flickers faintly inside her, she can sense that one wrong step could close this door forever. She rises to her feet, stepping back toward the doorway as her husband and father-in-law watch her without hostility, but without full trust. The breeze shifts the curtains behind them, revealing sunlight cutting through the room, half warm, half shadowed. It mirrors exactly what this moment is. A door not fully open, not fully closed. She steps outside with a heart both heavy and hopeful, knowing the road ahead will be long. But as the door clicks softly behind her, she understands the final truth. Some consequences fade, but some scars stay to remind us never to become who we once were.